From our boardroom studios at Belleville Sens headquarters inside the beautiful Quinte Sports and Wellness Center, this is episode 16 of the Belleville Sens Podcast. David Foote and Joel Vanderland here with you as always, and not a whole pile of hard-hitting Belleville Sens headlines to get you through this week, but we had some big community initiatives. We're still giving people the advance option to buy their season tickets. We'll chat about some of the ongoings around the office over the last couple weeks. We'll also get you caught up on the Calder Cup playoffs, the end of the ECHL Kelly Cup playoff run for our affiliate down in Allen, Texas, and we'll get in depth into the Calder Cup playoffs, which are now into the third round, if you can believe it. Patrick Williams from the AHL.com will join us later on in the program. Before we get going, we'll remind you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, especially during the summer months when we're kind of off and on, and a 5-star review and rating would be fantastic as well, as we try to drive the Belleville Sens podcast up the charts even through these non-hockey months as the season and the playoffs begin to wind down. A lot of playoff watching in this office, both the Calder Cup playoffs, obviously, the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the Ontario Hockey League playoffs as well, because our friends up in Peterborough just down the street in the OHL final against the London Knights, and we've got a handful of connections to the Peterborough area here in our office, so we're keeping an eye on the maroon and white as well, as because, again, it's okay to cheer for an AHL team and an OHL team.
Yeah, definitely, and especially when we have, like you mentioned, the connections and a couple local stars on that team as well, and Donovan McCoy and Owen Beck, who train here in the off season. Donovan McCoy, a Belleville native, and Owen Beck from just up the street in Port Hope. So a lot of eyes on that series as well.
So it might not be an overly long show this week, likely just our two segments, Joel and I, and then we'll be joined by Patrick Williams from the AHL.com. But there is a lot to talk about. We want to talk about guaranteed dates. We have 6 games now that you can put in group deposits for ahead of the schedule release. We had some more partners re-sign again for the upcoming season. Mops Inc. is back, as is Lifestyle Home Products. Real excited to have both of them back on. And perhaps the biggest news for this club over the last week is that members of the Belleville Senators staff and staff from Quinte Conservation and a bunch of students from our neighbors at St. Teresa's Secondary School were just across the street at Riverside Park here in Belleville planting 250 baby trees last week as the finish off of our Break a Stick, Plant a Tree program, which I think was a smashing success early on, or in its tenure. I guess it's the first time we've done that program. But, it seemed to go really, really well on Thursday with everybody involved.
Yeah, it did, and there was a nice ceremony with Mayor Neil Ellis, Brianne Matthews from our business operations vice president, and as well as Quinte Conservation. So a really nice event, and you get to learn a little bit about the impact of what these trees are going to do for our community and keep our shoreline protected, as well as a credit to the organization, find a sustainable way to replace the loss of these sticks, as we know over the course of 72 games, quite a lot of sticks get broken in frustration, or just kind of a hazard out there, blocking shots, taking slap shots and whatnot. So really kudos to the organization, and to find a way to make a loss into something very positive.
Yeah, and this, again, like, we know that sticks aren't made of wood anymore, and it's not a true, replenish the wood that we're taking to make these sticks, but it's more about, making that positive environmental impact to kind of offset some of those other not so environmentally friendly initiatives that all businesses, not just ours, kind of deal with on the day-to-day. And it's nice to have this patch of trees, if you will, just across the street from the rink here. Fans will be able to drive by them as they grow and mature and be like, hey, those are the Belleville Senators planted those trees. And it will make a pretty significant impact on the good environmentally. We chatted with a number of staff members at Quinte Conservation, and they kind of broke things down for us in terms of what it would actually mean. Maya Navrot is Quinte Conservation's Outreach and Stewardship Coordinator, and we'll have her tell us a little bit about the mix of trees that we were able to get planted here last week.
So we had a mix of some oak and maples. We had some pines, a little bit of balsam fir, some spruce, and then we put in a number of flowering shrubs as well. And so we really like to aim for a diversity of native species whenever we go in and restore areas.
And as she tells us as well, again, it's not just to make the land look nicer. It's not just to add more oxygenating leaves. There's a pretty specific reason that they chose that area that has to do with an invasive species here in the Quinte region, the emerald ash borer. And Maya Navrot from Quinte Conservation explains a little bit more about the reasoning behind the location.
So that's another reason we're always putting in the diversity of species now. We want to make sure that our urban forests and our forests across the region are as resilient as possible. When you just have one species and a disease or a virus or a bug comes in, it can wipe out all of those in one shot.
And we had, like we said, lots of help from the front office staff. Head coach Dave Bell, his wife Brooke, and their daughter were there. Mike Boyce from the equipment staff fittingly was there as well. So this really was a big-time team effort, a big community project, and we're really, really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said, when we're driving down the street in 5-10 years, hopefully we'll be able to see these trees and the little forest that we planted and take some pride in that and know that we're doing right by the community, doing right by the environment, and definitely a worthwhile project. And I'm happy to do a little bit of the part. I know a lot more people in the organization did more for it, but it's great to see, and it was a great afternoon planting some trees.
Again, you can find out more about that initiative at BellevilleSens.com, and you can also find out more about purchasing season ticket packages, business elite memberships, and more as we continue this renewal period, and we'll run that into our next topic on the show this week, and that is guaranteed dates for the 23-24 regular season. Now, the full schedule won't be out until probably late July, early August, but we can give you 6 dates that you can circle on your calendar right now that the Belleville Sens will be playing at home, and some of our favorite activations or promotions are already tied to these 6 dates. So we can tell you that the home opener presented by CAA for your 23-24 Belleville Senators will be on Saturday, October 21st. It'll be followed up the following week, Friday the 27th of October, with Student Night presented by Loyalist College. We're really looking forward to welcoming some returning and new Loyalist students out to a Belleville Sens game, perhaps for the first time. Military Appreciation Night is back in its pre-Remembrance Day time slot, if you will, Friday, November 10th. We'll have Military Appreciation Night. We're working on a lot of exciting new activations that we can add into that. We'll have, of course, the pregame ceremony, the Remembrance Day ceremony. We're trying to get in touch with our friends over at the National Air Force Museum of Canada, see what kind of cool stuff they might be able to bring in. Again, just a night to really honor the not just the service and sacrifice of the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, but that military tradition here in this area as well. We do it every week with our Hero of the Game and more, but you can't drive through the Quinte region without feeling that military connection, and Military Appreciation Night is a perfect way for us to celebrate that.
No, you can't, and it's a night that this organization really relishes in, like you mentioned, and just having the base in Trenton there and 8-wing, and just seeing the service members come out and enjoy a night out of hockey and be honored for what they truly do for each and every one of us is a special evening, and looking forward to another great military appreciation game on November the 10th.
November the 18th, the following weekend, will be our Hockey Fights Cancer Night. We've got the proofs in for our specialty jerseys. That'll be our first of 3 specialty jersey nights this season. We're not going to spoil what the other 2 are just yet, but we can tell you it will be black lavender and white Hockey Fights Cancer jerseys. So we've done the full lavender, we've done the white, now we're going to do the black to round that out. That's coming up November 18th. Into December, and the Teddy Bear Toss is back again on September 9th. We'll be supporting the Belleville Firefighters Toy Drive, as we always do with that event. So bring your new or gently used stuffed teddy, toss it on the ice when the Sens score their first goal, and they'll be collected for that charity, the Belleville Firefighters Toy Drive. And then the last guaranteed date is December 22nd, also a Friday night, for our holiday celebration game, and details on that to come. But again, if you are already itching, jonesing to get back in the rink, those are 6 games that you can put in group deposit requests for, or if you're looking for a flex pack or a season ticket membership, those are some of the dates that we can tell you now to get you excited. And really, again, the group outings, great chance to bring your group or minor sports team out. 10 people is all you need for a group rate, and you'll get the best rates on tickets, and you can take part in some of our activations like the bench warmers, get on the bench during the warm-ups, interact with the players, High Five Tunnel, Blue Line Club, and more. Again, all the details at BellevilleSens.com. It's funny because the season just ended, and you're kind of looking at the next 4 months going, it's summertime, we can ease off the pedal a little bit, relax, get some sun, but here we are already getting dates for next season, and it's just another reminder that, for us here in the office, the work doesn't stop, and for fans, outside of the office and around town and beyond, the season's not that far away, even though it just ended.
No, it's not, and we see it. We see the messages on Facebook, Twitter, all those social media apps, and fans are asking already, hey, when can we get back in the rink? When can we see our friends that we see each weekend at hockey games and interact with the players? And I think this season was a good building block for a lot of that. We saw post-COVID a lot more people come back into the rink, so these guaranteed dates are just another reminder that, hey, hockey's coming back soon, and make sure you grab your tickets and enjoy a nice weekend out over the course of the first half of the season here.
Again, all the information at BellevilleSens.com. You can hover over the tickets link at the top of the page, and that will give you the list of all our different ticketing options, and you can just click through there, and there's forms that are easy to find and to fill out, and a member of the crack ticketing staff here at the Belleville Sens will be happy to get in touch with you and get you sorted out for the upcoming season. And as much as we're talking about the upcoming season, Joel, the current season is still going, and the Calder Cup playoffs are starting to get pretty serious now. We're into the divisional finals, and the Atlantic Division is a 2-0 lead for the Hershey Bears. The North Division is a 2-0 lead for the Rochester Americans. And then both Western Conference divisional final series, the Central and the Pacific, both tied 1-1 between Texas and Milwaukee, and Calgary and Coachella Valley, respectively. I'm trying to remember. We were at Toronto, Utica, Syracuse, Rochester when we spoke last. I think those series were just wrapping up. Toronto ended up beating Utica 3-1. Rochester getting by Syracuse in that decisive 5th game, an overtime thriller at the Upstate Medical University Arena in Syracuse. So I had to pull that one out of the bag. Really, I mean, if we just hone in on the North Division, and maybe when Pat Williams joins us in a little bit, we'll get some more broader analysis of the playoffs. It has been a very, very tight first couple of rounds in the North Division, and I think that's as expected, especially if you look at the North Division and the standings throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Toronto, they haven't had their starting goalie for the playoffs. He's been up with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
He's been a little busy.
Yeah. So you look at that, and you look at the 7 goals they allowed on Saturday night, and you got to think, okay, you're getting some reinforcements here from Joseph Wall. But like you mentioned, it's been tight. Toronto's they won the division, and the last time we were talking about them, we were saying, hey, when are they going to get it figured? They had a really tough, for lack of a better word, second half of the season after the trade deadline. So they've been able to manage with their recalls, their injuries, their trades, and all that. And right now they're looking up at it against the Rochester Americans, but they're the type of team that I wouldn't count out. They've had their back against the wall many times, and each time they come out swinging, and they end up winning most series. So, like you mentioned, it's going to be tight, and heading back to Blue Cross Arena, that's not going to be an easy task. But the Toronto Marlies, Rochester Americans, they know each other well, and I don't think the Toronto Marlies are going to go down without a fight here.
Third game of that series is Wednesday, May 17th in Rochester, Friday, May 19th for Game 4, and if necessary, Game 5 will be back in Toronto on Sunday, May 21st, depending on when you are listening to this show. Logan Shaw has been the best player for the Toronto Marlies. He's among the league leaders in points in the playoffs with 9 over 6 games, but you can't help but notice the Coachella Valley Firebirds and the stable that the Seattle Kraken have really put together with their AHL club early on in its lifetime. Among the top 10 scorers in the American Hockey League in the Calder Cup playoffs right now, 6 of them are members of the Coachella Valley Firebirds who have scored in bunches in these playoffs, and they are really putting themselves at the forefront of the top teams in this league without question.
Yeah, and that's even without Ty Karche, who's up with the Seattle Kraken in their playoff run. So for a young franchise, for a young NHL franchise to be looking up at getting to the NHL Conference Finals, and you're in the Pacific Finals as well here with the Coachella Firebirds, it's just a big credit to Ron Francis and his staff there.
And to be fair, Coachella Valley is playing really well, but they are playing a lot of games. Like, they're not stomping teams. They haven't railroaded anybody. They beat Tucson 2-1 in the first round. They beat Colorado. It took them 5 games. So it's taken them the entire length of the series to get through, but they just keep digging deeper and deeper and managing to get the job done, although in tough against the Calgary Wranglers with these teams tied 1-1 and both of these teams really going head-to-head with each other throughout the course of the regular season as well.
Yeah, and you're looking at maybe 2 of the best goalies in the whole entire American Hockey League with Joey Decourt and Dustin Wolf. So it's going to be a battle. Like we've said, we talked about the North Division Finals. We talked about all these other playoff matchups. It's going to be tight. You're looking at it probably going the distance again. And both teams have a lot to play for here, and I'm just looking at the stats here of this Calgary team too. Just you look at it, you got Matthew Phillips point per game, you got Jeremy Poirier, another young guy, point per game. It's pretty impressive to see all these types of guys putting up these points at a young age in the American Hockey League, and just showing the amount of skill, the amount of prospect development that really goes on here in the American Hockey League on a day-to-day basis.
More on the Calder Cup playoffs coming up in a few moments with Patrick Williams from the AHL.com, but we'll finish our first segment of the program, first of 2 segments on this shortened show, by catching up on our ECHL affiliate, the Allen Americans, who got through the first round all right against the Kansas City Mavericks. Kevin Mandolese was excellent in 6 games played in that first round series for Allen. They had that awful attack at the mall not far from the rink down there in Allen. They had to deal with that early in the second round against Idaho, and I don't know how much a tragedy like that really plays into things. Sometimes you can draw strength from it. Sometimes it kind of weighs on your mind. Maybe it didn't factor in at all, but that's something that the Allen Americans and their fans and their community had to deal with, and obviously we are alongside them in going through that. But they're done now. They lose to the Idaho Steelheads in round 2, and just not enough in the tank, I guess, from the Allen Americans to get the job done against a tough Idaho team that had a pretty good season in their own right.
Yeah, and you look at it, and it was a tough series for the Allen Americans, no doubt about it. They go down 4-1, and there's no shame. They got to the Mountain Division Finals, and I think for Kevin Mandolese, like you mentioned, really stellar opening round of the playoffs, and kind of hit some speed bumps here, but all in all, great season from Kevin Mandolese. Zachary Mascott, another player that was signed to Belleville at the beginning of the year, a young defenseman, only 21 years old, so a lot to take out of this season for both those gentlemen, and no shame getting that far in the playoffs and coming up a little bit short, as we know. And I think this bodes well for both them. And the Allen Americans are an outstanding franchise. They constantly are winning. So obviously some disappointment in falling short. But at the end of the day, I think they'll bounce back like they always do.
Yeah, and they'll have a whole summer now to reevaluate things and to find those key players that will help them through the ECHL season next year. And, of course, they'll leave some holes open for the guys who may be coming down from the Senators to join them. So lots to look forward to for the Allen Americans, despite being ousted in the second round of the playoffs, and still some good playoff experience, I think, for Kevin Mandolese. We talked about it a couple weeks back. Doesn't matter what league it is. Anytime you can get into that do or die, type of mentality, type of game, it's going to go a long way in your prospect development, and I think the Senators will be pleased to at least see Mandolese get into the 8 or so or whatever playoff games he played in.
Yeah, for sure, and I think, too, with goalies, it's never a bad thing to keep playing hockey games, and we looked at Kevin Mandolese, and it's been a lot of seasons where it hasn't been. It's been 17 games. It's been 10, 11, 12, 13 games here and there because he's been hurt. So to get that playoff experience, to get a full season under his belt, play a National Hockey League game, play some Kelly Cup playoff games, play some meaningful games here as well, I think it only bodes well for him going into the summer. And I know he's the type of guy that's always hungry to improve, has a good attitude towards that. So always a smiling face around the rink. So it's good to see Mando get the credit he deserves and kind of put that on paper now that he can show management that, hey, I've won some games in the Kelly Cup playoffs. I've won an NHL game. I've been a mainstay in Belleville when I'm healthy. So all in all, a good season for Kevin.
And, congratulations to Kevin Mandolese and all the players and staff with the Allen Americans as they wrap up their season, in a loss to the Idaho Steelheads. Again, we'll have more on the Calder Cup playoffs coming up in a couple of minutes. Patrick Williams from the AHL.com will join us to discuss the latest on what's going on around the league. We'll get some outside perspective on the Belleville Senators as well, and the official hiring of head coach Dave Bell, who has now been firmly atop that spot for the last couple of weeks. And who knows what we'll touch on with Pat Williams as we get set for a extended and broad discussion on the American Hockey League with one of the premier and authoritative voices in American Hockey League journalism. Patrick Williams joins us next on the Belleville Sens Podcast. Again, subscribe to the show, rate, review. We'll be back in just a moment on episode 16.
Get in the game. Start planning now for the next season of Belleville Senators hockey. Renewals now open for new and returning season seat members. Buy your season seat membership before May 31st and you'll be entered into the weekly draw for awesome prizes, game-worn jerseys, to Sens prize packs and more. One lucky fan will receive their season seat membership for free. More info on season seat memberships, flex packs, and the Business Elite program at BellevilleSens.com. Go, Sens, go! Get in the game. Start planning now for the next season of Belleville Senators hockey. The new Belleville Sens Business Elite program is a season seat membership just for business. Use tickets to treat your staff or attract new clients. Benefits include AHL TV game packages, exclusive member events, and more. All packages offer a VIP business experience like in-arena signage. More info on season seat memberships, flex packs, and the Business Elite program at BellevilleSens.com. Go, Sens, go!
Back on episode 16 of the Belleville Sens Podcast. David Foote and Joel Vanderland here as we continue to recap the last couple weeks of playoff action and again, get you up to date on what's going on around the club here in the offseason. And glad to have you with us. Again, another reminder to please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes moving forward, a rating and a review wherever you're listening would be fantastic as well. As we continue on in episode 16, and we dive a little bit deeper into the playoff picture, we're really glad to be joined on the line by Patrick Williams from the AHL.com, and NHL.com covers this league extremely closely, probably closer than anybody else that we know, and because of that, he's the perfect guy to chat with us a bit on this week's episode. Hey, Pat, how's it going?
Hey, Footy, how's it going? Good to be back.
Yeah, nice to have you back on again. It's been a little bit busy for us lately in terms of preparations already for the new season, but obviously for someone like yourself trying to cover as much of this league as possible, it's likely been a busy few weeks for you over the first few rounds of the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting because the playoffs have these ebbs and flows, right? Because obviously, you're trying to get a lot of weekend dates in this league in the playoffs. So you'll get one night you'll have 4, 5, 6 games. Then maybe, there's been a couple gaps in there as well where you go maybe 3 or 4 days without any games. So it's a little different rhythm from the regular season and the playoffs, certainly compared to the NHL. But now it's starting to find a flow. And I think once we get to the conference final, you get the best of 7, then you'll start to, kind of get, more into a real traditional playoff flow.
Yeah, we're in the midst of one of those lulls right now, as we have this gap, especially in the North Division final between the Rochester Americans, Toronto Marlies. They don't play until Wednesday after playing last on Saturday, so certainly the guys are well rested at this time of year. Let's just go back, I guess, to the regular season overall. Now that it's done, Pat, what were some of the big storylines for you coming out of the 72 games that we just saw get finished up?
Well, for one, it was just that there were no real disruptions, right? Even last year, midway through the season, you had that resurgence with COVID, and you had the taxi squads came back, and you had 1,500 transactions in 1 month across the league, and it still felt pretty chaotic, right? You had some teams that couldn't have fans for a certain point. This year just felt normal, really the first time since 2019, 20, until everything shut down. So that was the first thing. That was the big success. And I think for me, the second biggest story was really the number of high level first round picks you saw. You had number 2 in Shimon Nemitz in Utica. Yeah, number 4, Shane Wright in Coachella. Yeah, David Jiricek in Cleveland. Yuri Kulik in Rochester at number 28, right? These are 18-year-old, 19-year-old first-round picks that came in and were entrusted by their NHL clubs to go to the AHL, and it was, I think, a real sign of confidence in what the AHL offers, but it was also impressive just how well those young players adjusted. Really, they're barely not even a year out of high school.
Yeah, and from the Belleville Senators' perspective, we saw a lot of these guys as well. Pat and Roby Arventi, he's a sophomore player, but he's 19, 20 years old. Ridley Gregg, just in his first taste of professional hockey, kind of being yo-yoed up between Ottawa and Belleville. What did you kind of see from a younger team in Belleville throughout the course of the season as well?
Well, yeah, I felt like I saw 2 or 3 or 4 different teams, given the constant roster changes, the injuries. I mean, I think it was an omen. Game 1 in Laval, Mads Sogard goes down 4 minutes into the game, right? It's just kind of a sign of the season, right? 53 players, 10 goalies, those guys that came in, to back up. I mean, I think back to that day in Bridgeport. I'm sure Footy remembers, where Kevin Mandolese was hurt and more skate. Yeah, you had Luke Richardson had just come in from Queens, on a PTO, and they throw him in there. They had to sign Brian Wilson out of the Federal League in Danbury, scramble to get him to come in back up, and that week I think really kind of symbolized the whole season, right? You had 4 goalies in 4 games, and yet the team still did pretty well. They won 2 out of those 3 games on that weekend stretch, and they were in the fight right down till the final week of the regular season. Like I think had they actually been able to get into the playoffs, I think Belleville could have been a dangerous opponent. I know talking to other coaches around the league, especially in the North Division, they were wary of Belleville just because of this team. Like it's like no matter how much the hockey gods threw at them, like Belleville just kept coming at you and like finding a way. And never mind who was in the lineup, it was just the system worked, and I thought it reflected well on the Sens, just with everything they had to deal with. That they were still able to really fight really down to the final week.
Chatting with Patrick Williams from the AHL.com, on Twitter at PWilliamsAHL. You mentioned that the Sens are right in the mix with all of these other teams in the North Division. And when we look at kind of how the playoffs have gone, it seems like if Belleville had gotten in, they still would have been right in the mix. It's been so tightly contested here in the North, as I think we all expected it to be.
Yeah, like I found the North Division the most mystifying division of all the four in the league, right? Like just about everyone in that division at one point or another ran hot and cold, right? Like Toronto, like they built that huge lead, and then there are a lot of changes at the trade deadline, and they stumbled as badly as anybody down the stretch. Rochester had their highs and lows. Utica, same thing. Syracuse was a team I felt like I never got a sense all season kind of what they were about. Laval had that really bad start, and then they managed to get back into contention. Cleveland was kind of the opposite. They had a really hot start, and they struggled down the stretch, and then they finally managed to kind of get it together, but they ended up missing. So, it just was a division where like nothing ever seemed to quite mesh. Like you didn't kind of get those one or two teams that really, solidify themselves as top teams, and maybe those one or two teams at the bottom. Like everyone just kind of was like smushed together, and it certainly made it competitive, for the playoff races. But it was. I think if Belleville could have gotten in, they could have done some damage. Like you're looking at what Rochester did. They were a team that was not a sure thing. Really right down to the last week of the season as well. And now here they have the division champs Toronto on the ropes here with a chance to sweep them. So. It's just the nature of this league, especially with an extreme season like the B-Sens had, with those like you said, all those changes.
Yeah, and you mentioned the resiliency and the ability to stay in the fight till the end, and I think a lot of that goes to the credit of David Bell after he took over the head coaching position and now named head coach for next season as well. I know you got to chat with him last week, Patrick. What did you take away from those conversations, and maybe what's the buzz around the league about David Bell being appointed as the full-time head coach here?
Well, yeah, just for one, just a guy that Footy mentioned in his press release, it's going to be his 20th season coming up in the coaching business, right? Like a guy that's just been grinding, on and on and on. He coached in the Central League, which doesn't even exist anymore. He was an assistant, he was an associate, he was a head, he was in the OHL, he was in the AHL. He's just been around. For a guy that's not that old, he's got a ton of experience. So I think that's the first thing. I think everyone was just impressed by how he came in, right? Like mid-season, a lot of upheaval. It's a takeover on the fly, right in the middle of going into a weekend, game, and how he was able to do it. And the team really didn't seem to miss a beat, right? And I think he's a coach that knows how to kind of also just stay within his limits in terms of he didn't try to do too much too soon. He didn't come in and rip up the system. He didn't come in and try to be different. He didn't change his personality. He was just kind of who he was. And at a time where there was so much going on around them, they needed a steady hand. And I think that's exactly what he provided. I think the team obviously, when you look at how they played, they really took well to that. And it showed well in them.
You mentioned steady hand there, and I think that's maybe an important thing to key in on, especially when you look around the league and see coaching vacancies being filled by maybe some younger and more up-and-coming coaches. Sometimes I feel like a veteran coach who maybe is still a rookie in terms of being an AHL head coach can still be a pretty let's say, solid, significant option in terms of trying to lead some younger prospects forward. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And just also, certain teams need certain types of coaches at different points, right? Like, that's whether it's the NHL, the AHL, whoever, like if you have a huge group of prospects coming in, then like maybe you need that coach that's, really good, like a Seth Apper, for example, in Rochester. Like he had that real strong teaching background with the U.S. development program. So when Buffalo was, sending that huge influx into Rochester of young players, he was the guy for that job. Where, if you're a team where it's a little bit older, a little bit more veteran, maybe as older, kind of like a guy that gives teams a little bit more rope, is the right fit. So I think in this case, with the personnel that they have, where Belleville is and Ottawa is in terms of their development cycle, I think David Bell's the right fit for them at the moment.
There was a guy I wanted to ask you about, Patrick, Cole Castles. He had a career year for the Belleville Senators, 51 points in 64 games. A guy that you've covered throughout your tenure in the American Hockey League. What did you kind of see from him and some of these other veterans? I know we talk about the development of the league, but kind of these steady veteran guys that the Senators organization was able to bring in to steady the ship and kind of get this team on track.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, development only happens, I think, when you have those steady veterans, right? Like if you look at the top teams really around the entire hockey world, they all follow that blueprint, right? Where it's like you want to have good, strong, not just players on the ice, but personalities in the dressing room, guys that can really mentor, because you have situations where you have players that are 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're just trying to find their way in life, never mind in hockey, right? And like now they're thrown into the pro hockey world. It's a whole different animal from what they're used to, either in junior college, wherever they're coming from. And you need some guys that have been around, that have seen things and have been through situations. And I think that's what Cole Castles, like a Jake Lucchini, guys like that, obviously Dylan Hetherington, specifically with Castles, I just saw a guy that every single night, no matter what the schedule threw at them, no matter who he was playing with, no matter who was coming, who was going, like he showed up every single night. Like it was impressive. Like, and it was good to see him. Like he had gone off to Europe. Like typically when guys go to Europe, that's kind of the end of their North American time. Now he comes back, kind of reintegrates himself into the AHL and really has himself an awesome season. And I think has given himself, kind of a real, shot in the arm as far as his career at this level.
All right, Pat, before we let you go, let's shift back to the Calder Cup playoff picture right now. We're down to the Elite Eight as of the recording of this program on Tuesday, May 16th. A couple of the series in the, both series, I guess, in the Eastern Conference are almost done. They're a little tighter in the West. I'd like to go through and get your picks or your prognostications, at least on the four series that are still underway, and then perhaps maybe a thought on who you think has the best shot of winning the Calder Cup this season. Hershey is up 2-0 on Hartford. Do you see that series staying that way?
I do, and full disclosure, my playoff bracket long ago went up in smoke, so that's the first thing. But I certainly didn't have Hartford putting up the kind of the playoff run that they've had so far. They knocked off Providence, the Eastern Conference regular season champ. They did so pretty handily. Now that I think they have run into a real problem here with Hershey. Hershey's just big, heavy, physical team, and they can skate too, right? And they just have, I think, really grinded down Hartford here. The first two games, and that's the other thing too. It's like a best of five. You don't get much runway where to feel out the series and kind of get make adjustments. Like you're thrown into the fire right away, and I think that's the challenge for Hartford now. So Hershey I think should come through now. Like I don't see Hershey losing 3 in a row, and then obviously Rochester, Toronto, same thing. It's got to be a huge test now for the Marlies. Now they are getting Joseph Wall back, so that's a variable there. And that goes to show you like how much is influenced by what your parent team does or does not do. Had the Leafs moved on, Joseph Wall's not coming back, it's a different story. Now, I think that does give them at least a little bit of hope, despite being down 2-0.
Yeah, Wall will have to seal the game for sure. The Marlies have been such an enigma this season, too. I mean, they were so good off the start, and I guess it's not that puzzling that their performance slipped after that rash of trades, but they just have been so off and on lately, and as you say, they'll need to go on a bit of a heater here if they want to get even and then beat the Americans in that fifth and final game of the series. Over in the West, Texas and Milwaukee are tied 1-1. Coachella Valley wins an overtime, triple overtime thriller against Calgary to take a 2-1 series lead earlier in the week. Who do you like in the Western remaining playoff series?
I mean, the West is so deep. All four of those teams, I think, legitimate Calder Cup, like they could win if they can get through their series. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for any of these teams. Like trying to, whoever comes out of the West is just gone through an absolute gauntlet. Texas, Milwaukee, I took Texas in 5. Those teams are just so evenly matched. So like they're in some ways they're similar, in other ways they're different. But Nashville sent 7 players down to Milwaukee at the end of the regular season in the NHL, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. We've seen that. So far, it's worked pretty well for Milwaukee. They got past Manitoba. They were down 2-1 in that series. They handled that. Texas now, I think, now they're in a fight. Like they got past Rockford pretty easily that semifinal round, but Milwaukee's a different beast altogether. So that's I think I'll take Texas in 5, but that really is a coin flip for me. Coachella and Calgary, well, that one, as we saw, went to almost 3 a.m. in the morning in the East, midnight on the West Coast. I mean, and it was kind of just it was the classic triple overtime goal where they just fling the puck at the net and hope for the best, and the thing goes in. They beat Dustin Wolf, league MVP, goalie of the year. Joey Daccord, a guy, some Belleville fans will be familiar with, was phenomenal in that game. 59 saves for Coachella Valley. They're an interesting team. Like Coachella got an early scare. Like the first 8 playoff games they played, 3 of them, they were facing elimination. Like they had to, despite they were second overall in the league, they had to go to the playing round. And Tucson had them, facing elimination. They managed to get through that. Had a similar situation twice against Colorado, had to do that as well. So they're a team that certainly can play under pressure. It's been pretty well tested. Now they're up against the regular season champs in Calgary, a team that really, there's no weaknesses in that lineup. I guess the biggest challenge for Calgary is just, they did get tested by Abbotsford, but not in the same way that Coachella was tested in their series. So it'll be interesting to see now with Calgary. This is they're facing elimination. This is kind of new territory for them. How do they handle it? So if I had to pick a cup winner, though, whoever comes out of this series, I think Calgary or Coachella, I'll take, because I think these teams are just. You're looking at Coachella, they're getting back Ty Cartier. They got Andrew Polarowski back last night, who most people thought he was done for the year. He had torn his knee up in January, and that was supposed to be the end of it. He comes back, and then so they're getting him back, or they got him back. They should get Cartier back and Jesper Froden from Seattle. So that's a top line right there that you can add to a team that's already stacked. Shane Wright's there, so it's a deep group. So I mean, if you're gonna beat that team, you're gonna earn it, right? And so I'll go with whoever comes through that series. I know that's a bit of a cop out, but
well, but yeah, and then you back it up with some pretty significant supporting material for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, and wouldn't that be something for them to get as far as they have already, but to win the whole thing in their first year in their new home? That would be quite the story, to say the least.
Yeah, especially that was a team that they had that huge 2-month road trip in the beginning of the season, right? Where they're waiting for their building, then they come home, and they've had kind of a little bit of everything. Dan Bilesman's their head coach, so you have a Jack Adams coach there. It's been a wild year there. It's just been a huge success on and off the ice. So I mean, they've top the league in attendance and all the business numbers. So I remember you and I when they were, still kind of like in the expansion stages, talking like we really thought this was going to be successful, and it's been that even more.
It certainly has been, and potentially more success on the way for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Always a successful conversation when you have Pat Williams on from the AHL.com. Again, at P. Williams AHL if you want to follow along with all of his work on Twitter. Anything else from you, Joel, before we say goodbye here?
No, I think that's it, and thanks for coming on, Pat. It's always great to reconnect with you.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, that'll do it for us on episode 16 of the Belleville Sens Podcast. Once again, subscribe to the pod, rate and review wherever you're listening, and don't forget to stay tuned to the Belleville Sens social media. The summer crew will be out and about soon. Group deposits are now available for some of our guaranteed dates for the upcoming season. All that info at BellevilleSens.com, plus details on season ticket memberships and more if you are looking to get ready for the upcoming season here in the spring. With that, we'll say goodbye for Pat Williams, Joel Vanderland, David Foote, thanking you as always for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Belleville Sens Podcast.
Get in the game. Start planning now for the next season of Belleville Senators hockey. Buy flex packs ahead of the 23-24 American Hockey League season, starting at just $260. Packs have 12 tickets that can be used for any season game. 25 and 40 ticket flex packs include concession discounts, added tickets, and more. Buy flex packs before May 31st, and you're in the season seat prize draw. More info on season seat memberships, flex packs, and the Business Elite program at BellevilleSens.com. Go Sens, go!